Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Rouse IAS.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 14th of September 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let's now begin the discussion. Before we begin today's discussion, we have selected few of the pointers which you must know. I'm going to read out these statements and you have to understand through this discussion whether they are true or false. Towards the end of the discussion, we will display the correct answers. But that is not the idea. The idea is to identify yourself through the learning of this lecture whether they were true or false. Statement 1 is, whenever the Legislative Assembly is dissolved, the Speaker shall vacate his/her office immediately. According to the provisions laid down in the Constitution of India, in Lok Sabha the Speaker's post goes to the majority party and the Deputy Speaker's post to the opposition. Notification for election of Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha is given by the President. Salaries and allowances of Speaker of Lok Sabha are expenditures charged on Consolidated Fund of India. Then there is a table on which left hand side has been given name of the apps which are American, and then on the right hand column there is Chinese replacements names have been given. You have to identify which one of them is correctly matched. So Google's Chinese replacement is Baidu, YouTube's Chinese replacement is Youku Todo, Instagram's Chinese replacement is Xiaohongshu, and WhatsApp's Chinese replacement is WeChat. Which one of these are correctly or incorrectly matched? The next statement is, COVID-19 virus can be transmitted sexually. Chief Justice of India and Speaker of Lok Sabha have the same order of precedence. Index of Industrial Production is compiled and published every month by Central Statistics Office CSO of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. And the final statement is, Index of 8 Core Industry is released by DEA or Department of Economic Advisor in Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Let us now begin the discussion. This first news, the second chair appears on page number 6 in the form of column. More than a year after 17th Lok Sabha was constituted, the constitutionally mandated post of Deputy Speaker is lying vacant. Now this unusual situation is in news as the monsoon session of Parliament begins on Monday, that is today, and the Rajya Sabha is scheduled to elect a deputy chairman very soon. In this regard, it becomes very important from the perspective of prelims examination to cover various constitutional as well as extra constitutional provisions dealing with the presiding officers of Lok Sabha. Not only it gets covered under the prelims syllabus, but also, in the past years, questions have been asked. For example, in 2018, UPSC asked, the Speaker of Legislative Assembly shall vacate his or her office if he or she ceases to be a member of Assembly, which is correct. Second statement was, whenever the Legislative Assembly is dissolved, the Speaker shall vacate his or her office immediately, which is incorrect, which leads to the right answer, A, one only. These are constitutional provisions dealing with the post of presiding officer of Legislative Assembly, and it was asked in UPSC prelims examination. And similarly, in 2017, UPSC had asked, consider the following statements. Statement 1 read, in the election for Lok Sabha or State Assembly, the winning candidate must get at least 50% of the votes polled to be declared elected. We all know this is incorrect because India follows first past the post system, in which there is no such cutoff for being declared as the winner of an election. The person polling the highest vote gets elected. Second statement is, according to the provisions laid down in the Constitution of India, in Lok Sabha, the Speaker's post goes to majority party and the Deputy Speaker's to the opposition. Now this statement is incorrect. Although it is true that the Speaker's post generally goes to the majority party and Deputy Speaker's post generally goes to the member of an opposition party, but these provisions have not been given in the Constitution of India, and hence this particular question highlights the importance of reading a question in prelims examination very, very carefully. You will read the second part of the statement and think it is correct, but these provisions have not been given in the constitution, and hence overall statement when read together proves to be incorrect because these provisions have not been given in the constitution. And hence the right answer is D, neither one nor two. So you can understand that presiding officers are very, very important from the perspective of UPSC exam. We will discuss various provisions with respect to Speaker and Deputy Speaker. So for conducting the proceedings of the House, each House, which is Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, has its own set of presiding officers. In case of Rajya Sabha, it is known as Chairman and Deputy Chairman. In case of Lok Sabha, they are known as Speaker and Deputy Speaker. Question also arises that when did these offices come into existence in India's democratic history? And so for the first time, the provisions related to Speaker and Deputy Speaker were created in Government of India Act 1919, and the offices came into existence in 1921. So in 1921, Frederick White and Sachidanand Sinha were appointed by the Governor General of India as the first Speaker and the first Deputy Speaker respectively. But you should focus here that both of them were appointed by Governor General of India and they were not elected. And hence the question arises as to who was the first Indian to be elected as a Speaker of Central Legislative Assembly, and that was Mr. Vittal Bhai J. Patel in 1925. So these are few of the facts which you should keep in mind. Let's now move on to the actual provisions related to Speakers and Deputy Speaker. So what we have done is that provisions related to Speaker have been written in the left side with a different color, and the provisions related to Deputy Speaker has been enumerated on the right hand side. Let us now start the discussion by discussing the manner in which they are elected. So it is not difficult to think that they are elected by members of Lok Sabha. And as soon as post of either Speaker or Deputy Speaker falls vacant, a re-election has to be conducted. Now there is a difference between as to who notifies the date of election. In case of Speaker, the date is notified by the President, whereas in case of Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha, that date is notified by the Speaker herself. And now this is because of the news appears in the newspaper today. Since the current Speaker of Lok Sabha belongs to the ruling party, and ruling party doesn't want elections for the post of Deputy Speaker to be conducted, and hence that is why the Speaker is not notifying the date of election for the post of Deputy Speaker. If we talk about removal, then almost all the provisions are similar, except for the fact that Speaker of Lok Sabha can resign by giving his resignation letter to Deputy Speaker, whereas Deputy Speaker resigns by giving his or her resignation letter to Speaker. Apart from that, other two conditions are same. So for example, if a member ceases to be the member of Lok Sabha, then he or she cannot become Speaker of Lok Sabha or cannot continue to hold the position of Speaker or Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha. Or he or she resigns by giving letters to respective authorities, or he or she is removed by a resolution passed by a majority of all the members of Lok Sabha. Such a resolution can be moved only after giving 14 days advance notice, and this is common for both Speaker as well as Deputy Speaker. So the only difference between the removal is the resignation letter is written to each other. In case of Speaker, it is written to Deputy Speaker. In case of Deputy Speaker, it is written to Speaker. Since these two posts are constitutional in nature, they of course derive their power from the Constitution. A lot of provisions have been mentioned in the Constitution itself, but Constitution is not the only source for power for these two posts. Rules of procedure and conduct of business of Lok Sabha is one, and parliamentary conventions is another. So there are three sources of power for these two posts, and which is common to both of them. Now, rules of procedures and conduct of business of Lok Sabha is a set of rule book which has been designed by Lok Sabha itself to guide the functioning of the House, whereas the parliamentary conventions our unwritten understanding about how some processes in Parliament should be done, but they are not written and no legal force exists behind them. So these are the three sources of power for the post of presiding officer of Lok Sabha, either Speaker or Deputy Speaker. Now here it is important to clarify one important difference between Speaker and Deputy Speaker. The Deputy Speaker performs the duties of the Speaker's office when it is vacant. Deputy Speaker also acts as Speaker when the latter is absent from the sitting of the House. In both the cases, he assumes all the powers of Speaker. He also presides over the joint sitting of both the Houses of Parliament in case the Speaker is absent from such a sitting. So that brings us to the powers of both Speaker as well as Deputy Speaker. Since Speaker and Deputy Speaker are presiding officers, their main job is to maintain order and decorum in the House for conducting its business and regulating its proceedings. This, you can say, is their primary responsibility, and they have final power with respect to maintenance of order and decorum in the House. Then an important task of presiding officer of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha is to interpret constitution, rules of procedure and conduct of business, as well as parliamentary conventions and procedures. Because you must have seen the members of parliament often fighting with each other with respect to a particular rule and its interpretation. And the Constitution of India has made the Speaker of Lok Sabha, and in his or her absence, Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha, as the final interpreter of Constitution of India, rules of procedure and conduct of business, and parliamentary convention. Then another significant power of Speaker or Deputy Speaker is the power of casting vote. Now you should know that presiding officer, either Speaker or Deputy Speaker, when they are sitting on the Speaker's chair, they cannot vote in the first instance. But he or she can exercise a casting vote in the case of a tie. Or in other words, only when the House is divided equally on any matter or any subject, the Speaker is entitled to vote. Such a vote is known as casting vote, and this is exercised in order to remove a deadlock. Then you must have seen a lot of sittings of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha being adjourned. And the final power of adjournment and suspension of the meeting or the sitting of houses is vested in the hands of presiding officer. She adjourns the house or suspends the meeting in absence of a quorum. So we all know that the quorum to constitute a meeting of the house is 1/10 of the total strength of the house. So if the strength of house is, let's say for example, members, then quorum should be at least 10% of 545, which means at least 55 members should be present for a sitting to be conducted. And if the minimum number of members are not 55, then the Speaker has the power to call off that particular meeting. Also, if the proceedings of the House are not being run properly, and if there is a lot of ruckus on the House, then also presiding officers can adjourn the meeting. Then the Speaker of Lok Sabha decides the question of disqualification of member of Lok Sabha on all those issues arising on the ground of defection under the provisions of 10th schedule. Then a very important power which has been given to the Speaker of Lok Sabha is the categorization of a bill as a money bill is in the hands of Speaker of Lok Sabha. He or she decides whether a bill is a money bill, and his or her decision on this question is final. This is important because when a bill is transmitted to Rajya Sabha, and if it is categorized as money bill, the opinion of the Rajya Sabha doesn't matter. And so that is one of the ways through which Rajya Sabha can be bypassed. And hence that is a very important constitutional power given in the hands of Speaker. And then finally, whenever there is a joint sitting conducted for both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, it is the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, and in her absence, Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha, who presides over the joint sitting of both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And with respect to the current matter, you should understand that since the notification for the election for the post of Deputy Speaker is in the hands of Speaker, and since the Speaker is controlled by the ruling party, and since ruling party does not want any election, and hence the elections are being postponed. Let us now discuss few of the protections which have been offered to the post of speaker to ensure his or her independence and impartiality. As the office of the speaker is vested with such great prestige, position and authority, independence and impartiality is very important for her post. So starting with salaries and allowances, which in this case is fixed by the parliament. Also, they are expenditures which are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India and thus are not subject to annual voting of Parliament. So through this way, the Constitution has ensured independence to the post of Speaker, as the salaries and the allowances are not in the hands of the government itself. Then next comes a very important aspect of independence, which is security of tenure. She is provided with a security of tenure because a speaker can be removed only by a resolution passed by the Lok Sabha by an absolute majority. Now, absolute majority means a majority of total members of the house and not by an ordinary majority. On top of that, the motion for removal can be considered and discussed only when it has the support of at least 50 members. So we can see that how secure the tenure of Speaker of Lok Sabha is. And then comes the rule that the work and conduct of Speaker cannot be discussed and criticized in Lok Sabha, of course except when there is a substantive motion which have been moved, for example, the motion of the removal of the Speaker himself or herself. So the Speaker can only be criticized when the process of her removal is going on. Apart from that, you can't do that. And then finally, a very high position has been given to the Speaker in the order of precedence. He is placed at 7th rank, along with Chief Justice of India. So in the prelims examination, a question can be asked as to both Chief Justice of India and Speaker of Lok Sabha have the same order of precedence. This means that Speaker of Lok Sabha as well as Chief Justice are placed higher than all Cabinet Minister except Prime Minister. Both Chief Justice and Speaker of Lok Sabha are ranked higher than Cabinet Ministers. So this is it as far as the posts of Speaker and Deputy Speaker are concerned. Keep important things in mind from the perspective of prelims examination. Let's now move on to the next news. Next article, exploiting the Chinese exit, appears on page number 7, which talks about the recent government step of banning the Chinese apps, and as a consequence, many of the market leaders in a lot of arena, for example in gaming and in making short videos, the place of a market leader has become vacant. And the article today discusses the strategy or the policy or the orientation which the current crop of tech entrepreneurs in our country should adopt. And for that, author himself takes an inspiration from the internet scene in early 2000 in China. Then the author talks about the impact of the policies which were adopted by the Chinese in early 2000s, and then as a consequence, what should be the way forward for Indians, either to replace the apps which have been banned or to develop novel kind of solutions focused towards Indian problems. And we'll see what the author suggests. So currently we all know that almost all the American apps as well as service providers are inaccessible in China. So if you want to access Google or Facebook or Insta, they can't be opened from the Chinese mainland because of the internet censorship. But it was not always like that. Initially they were accessible. But in the first decade of the 2000s, China started imposing censorship on almost all the services which existed then. Google is one of them. They were asked to censor a lot of words which couldn't be searched from China, and they also asked almost all the service providers to ban a lot of pages, to which all the internet giants obliged and they agreed. But immediately after that, there were a lot of hacking attacks originating from China on Google, Yahoo and various other search engines and service providers which existed back in 2000s, against which these multinational companies complained and expected Chinese government to take actions against these hackers, because by that time it had been well established that they were Chinese in origin and even their location was known. But Chinese government refused to take any actions on hackers, and it appeared as if that these hackings were actually supported by the government. As a protest, US companies refused to censor the items which Chinese government wanted to censor. They said that if you are not ready to help us by penalizing the hackers, we are not going to oblige you by censoring the content on our search engines. And as a result, almost all the American internet products, for example, Google, YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, have been banned as far as its use and access is concerned in China. So overall, it seems like an issue of internal security. Chinese government did not want its citizens to search certain items, and they were not very confident on American MNCs that whether they will effectively implement the censorship or not, and hence they banned access. But according to author, if you look 15 years later, it seems like a very long-term economic policy. Because what these bans did is that instead of Google, now it has a world-class search engine known by the name of Baidu. Instead of YouTube, China has Youku Tudu, which is as good as YouTube. Instead of Instagram, they have Xiaohang Shu. And instead of WhatsApp, they have even powerful tool which is known as WeChat, which is not just a messaging site, but it is also a payment bank, just like Paytm or Google Pay. And it is also a news delivery app. So you can see that due to the ban enabled by the China, or due to the great firewall erected by the Chinese government, almost all the global products have been substituted by the domestic tech entrepreneurs. And hence, according to the author, the future is going to be similar in case of India if this ban on Chinese apps continue. And there are two ways in which the tech entrepreneurs can make the best use of the current opportunity provided due to geostrategic reasons. First is they can design and launch replacements or alternatives to almost all the apps which have been banned. So for example, in place of TikTok, another app which is known by the name of Josh has already been launched in the market, and similarly various other apps catering to the needs of short video streaming services have already been launched. So that is one way. Identify the area in which banned Chinese app was dealing and then provide an alternative. But according to the author, that strategy is not going to go a long way in order to help Indian entrepreneurs and Indian tech scene. What the entrepreneurs should focus is on developing novel solutions which are applicable across India, which should focus on everyday life and aspects of everyday life of Indians, and the problems which these solutions will want to address should be hyper-regional. And the reason why author says so is because if you look at the Indian society, it is multilingual. Hundreds of languages are spoken across the country. It is multi-ethnic or multicultural. The geography varies across the country, which creates unique problems which are very local in origin. And there is a lot of economic disparity across the country as well. And hence, when all these factors act together, they create hyper-regional demands and problems, which need hyper-regional solutions. So instead of focusing on developing an app to replace TikTok, the tech designer should actually focus their energies towards solving the problems of Indians at micro level. It will not only help Indians, but let's say if you are successful in India and if you want to take that app global, it will be very easy. Because if your app has worked in India, it means that it has worked on a lot of languages, as well as it was acceptable to a lot of cultures. It was able to address the issues of geography, and it was acceptable to people belonging to almost all the stratas of our society, especially dealing with economy. And hence, any such app which has proven its mettle to address issues in India can easily become a global app just like WhatsApp or TikTok. And it will be much beneficial as compared to these apps because it will be focused towards addressing local problems. And hence, the author insists that instead of creating another alternative for entertainment of netizens, the Indian developers should focus themselves towards problem solving. Let's now move on to the next news. This next article appears as a lead article on page number 6. Coronavirus fears and preconception advice. This article talks about delaying of pregnancy in India by using contraception methods so that one of the most vulnerable sections as far as COVID-19 pandemic is concerned can be saved of the worst of the consequences arising due to novel coronavirus. Let us first discuss a question which was asked in Prelims Examination 2017. Consider the following statements. Statement 1 was, in tropical regions, Zika virus disease is transmitted by the same mosquito that transmits dengue. This statement is correct. It is indeed transmitted by Aedes aegypti mosquito. Then the second statement said, sexual transmission of Zika virus disease is possible, which is also correct, which leads us to the right answer both 1 and 2. Now what is important is that since Zika was in news in 2016 and 17, especially with respect to the kind of complications it introduced in pregnant women and infants, similarly, the particular editorial which we are going to take up now lays special emphasis on the consequences of novel coronavirus on pregnant and newborns, because of which authors propose increasing adoption of contraception to delay the pregnancy, especially in coming few months in India. As far as basics are concerned with respect to novel coronavirus, its transmission, its impact, symptoms, all have been done multiple times in our TNS. And today we are going to keep our focus limited to pregnant women and her child. And so according to the authors, both of which are renowned doctors and researchers in the medical field, COVID-19 virus has a special place or love for inner lining of blood vessels. So all those organs which will be rich in blood vessels, the concentration of coronavirus and its impact will be multiple times on those regions. And that is why placenta, an organ developed during the time of pregnancy, is especially rich in blood vessels, and hence all those mothers who are infected with novel coronavirus, especially very close to the time of their delivery, the virus in those women have been found to have infected placenta. And around 2% of the women who were COVID positive at the time of pregnancy gave birth to COVID positive child. We already know that Zika, swine flu and all other kinds of respiratory diseases, when infect the mother during the time of pregnancy, lead to congenital diseases in the newborn. Congenital is another name for all those diseases which are present from birth. So far there is no established fact that COVID-19 also introduces some kind of congenital disease, but it is a very new virus, and the babies born during the time of COVID are still at max 6 to 8 months old, and still remains to be seen when the further data points emerge what kind of diseases has this novel coronavirus introduced in the babies who are born at a time when their mothers were infected with novel coronavirus. Nonetheless, since other viral diseases introduce congenital abnormalities, it is expected that COVID-19 would also lead to some kinds of complications as and when child grows. And hence, to substantiate their argument, they have presented RT-PCR data of all the pregnant women who report to secondary or tertiary healthcare system in India. And they have found out that of all the deliveries being conducted right now in our country, around 8 to 10% of the women turn out to be COVID positive at the time of their delivery. So, although overall infection rate reported in our country is very low, but we know that actual societal transmission is at a very high rate. And hence, out of 100 women reporting for delivery, 10% of them are COVID positive, and hence as many as children being born in our country are at threat of developing various kinds of neurological as well as physical deformities when they grow up. Then authors say that since 10% of the all pregnant women reporting in the healthcare facilities are COVID positive, let's see how much total women get pregnant every day. And they have utilized the data of daily birth in our country. So according to the Government of India, around 7.5 lakh children are born every day in our country. And assuming that the outcome of the pregnancy is successful in only half of the cases. So if 100 women become pregnant, only 50 go on to become a mother, which takes the total number of pregnancy to 15 lakh. And then author produce 4 very good and interesting benefits which are to be achieved if more and more women in our country adopt contraception methods and delay their pregnancies for few months during the time of COVID. So the first obvious benefit will be fewer COVID positive mothers and infants. Since mothers are considered to be most vulnerable amongst all the infected patients, because pregnancy is just like a comorbidity. Just like a person having diabetes is at a higher risk, similarly a pregnant woman is at a higher risk. Avoiding pregnancy at the time of COVID will reduce the vulnerability of the mother and will also reduce the vulnerability of the newborn child. Then we all know that there are a lot of antenatal visits which are required before the pregnancy. So antenatal is before the birth. There are a lot of vaccinations, regular checkups which are to be done before a child takes birth. And avoiding pregnancy would mean avoiding so many antenatal visits every day across the country, which will of course reduce the infection rate, because when women don't go out, the chances of them being infected also reduces. And if so many women do not visit our healthcare facilities, will also free up the resources of these hospitals to treat the COVID patients, and it would not cause burden on hospitals, especially at the time of COVID pandemic. Then we all know that what kind of economic devastation COVID has brought in its wake, and hence fewer infants born during the time of COVID would mean less economic burden during post-COVID era, where we will need rapid economic recovery. And especially the kind of toll which COVID has taken on economically challenged families, for example migrant workers, having less number of dependents on those families will make the recovery of our economy very rapid. Now this is not proven yet that whether COVID induces any kind of congenital disease or not, but since other similar viruses do, it is expected that in the wake of COVID-19 there will be a great increase in the number of children, especially under the age of 5, who will report with a lot of neurological as well as other kinds of deformities. And delaying pregnancy during this time would save millions of children of such kinds of diseases which occur at birth. And for delaying pregnancies, they advocate the use of contraceptions. Let's now move on to the next news. Next news appears on page number 6 in the form of column. Long haul ahead, which talks about the decline in factory output in our country. Now terms like index of industrial production or index of 8 core industries are very important from the perspective of prelims examination. And so it becomes important for us to cover them every time they appear in the newspaper. Before we go into the details, let us discuss this question which was asked in 2015. In the index of 8 core industries, which one of the following is given the highest weight? Answer in 2015 was electricity generation, and we will see how it will change if the same question is asked in 2020 prelims examination. Starting our discussion with index of 8 core industries. So there are 8 sectors in our country which are known as core sector industries. They are coal, crude oil, natural gas, petroleum refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement and electricity. Now they are core sector because the manufacturing and industrial development in our country depends on these 8 sectors. Not only that, the progress of these 8 sectors reflects the overall growth of industrial development in our country. So just to make the understanding of this concept clear, let us suppose that there are a lot of industries in our country, and the government wants to know which one of them are growing and how they are growing every month, because after all RBI, Finance Ministry and various other agencies of the government are taking a lot of steps to boost the industrial production in our country. And they want to check whether the steps which they are taking are bearing fruit on the ground or not. But Since there are a lot of industries, thousands and lakhs of them, it is simply not possible to collect the data of manufacturing from each one of them. So instead, what the government has done is that it tracks these 8 core industries. Now you would ask how tracking of these 8 core industries is a substitute for tracking all lakhs of industries in the country together. So let us understand it in this way. All the industries in our country producing anything need energy. And energy could be either electricity, or it could be natural gas, or it could be coal. And hence, if the production of all these industries together rises, it will either be reflected in increasing demand of electricity, or in increase in demand of natural gas, or in coal, or in increase of demand of all of them taken together. And that is how the government knows that the industrial development is taking off in a particular month where the energy demand has increased. And that is why it is an index. It is an indicator of something else. Similarly, if we want to keep track of agricultural sector, would it not be sufficient to just keep the track of fertilizer industry? If the demand for fertilizer in a particular month goes up, it definitely means that in the succeeding months, agricultural production is going to increase, because ultimately the fertilizers are used only in agriculture. And similarly, for construction sector or infrastructure sector, we can keep track of steel and cement. And that is how the whole index of 8 core industries work. Now it is important to understand that it is prepared by Office of Economic Advisor under Ministry of Commerce and Industry and is published monthly, and the base year is taken as 2011 and 12. So whatever number you see in 2020 is calculated against the base year of 2011 and 12. Since we have already understood that 8 core industry is not all the industries in our country, and hence the question arises that how much percentage of the overall industrial development do they constitute? And the 8 core industries constitute 40% of the total index of industrial production. Now comes the question which was asked in 2015 prelims examination. The highest weightage in the 8 core industries is given to the petroleum refinery production, whereas the lowest weightage is given to fertilizer production. And in 2015 question, the answer was electricity generation, because in 2015, that is 5 years ago, electricity production had the highest weightage, but subsequently it has changed, and in 2020 highest weightage is given to petroleum refinery production and lowest weightage is given to fertilizer production. A similar index of industrial production is prepared by National Statistical Office under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, which brings us to the discussion on IIP, which is again very important for prelims examination. So index of industrial production measures the quantum of changes in the industrial production in an economy and captures the general level of industrial activity in the country. Just like 8 core industries index, its base year is also 2011 and 2012. And that is why if the current IIP stands at 107, it means that there has been a 7% growth compared to the base year of 2011 and 12. Because we have taken the base year of 2011 and 12 and hence automatically allocated whatever industrial production was there in this financial year to 100. And whatever values mentioned in 2020 indicates an increase over that. As we have already discussed, IIP is calculated by CSO under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. If we talk about the items included in IIP, there are 2 ways in which they can be categorized. One is sectoral classification, next is use-based classification. So as far as sectoral classification is concerned, there are 3 categories: mining, manufacturing and electricity. And highest weightage in this classification is given to manufacturing. Then if we look into the use-based classification, we have primary goods or the goods which are directly obtained from nature, capital goods like plants and machineries which are used as a further investments for production of goods, for example boilers, gas compressors and engines. Then we have infrastructure or construction goods which are finished goods primarily used in infrastructure industry. Then we have intermediate goods which are used as an input in further production, for example cotton yarn and plywood. Then we have consumer durables like ACs and pressure cookers which are directly consumed by the consumers. And finally we have consumer non-durables which are products that are directly used by consumers and can't be preserved for long periods, for example soya bean oil or skimmed milk. So these are the facts which you should keep in mind with respect to index of industrial production and index of 8 core industries, both of which are declining due to COVID pandemic. Let us look at some of the important map locations. So this news article appearing on front page, status quo on LAC after Jaishankar Wong meet. So there is no change in troops position as well as strength at Pangong Tso Lake. There is a freeze on all movement and activities along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh after the foreign ministers of both the countries met in Moscow on September 10th. Now this issue has already been covered by Baswa sir. But what is important from the perspective of prelims examination is the map locations. So let us now understand few of the important map locations from the Daily News Simplified dated 1st of September 2020 done by our phenomenal Faizan sir. So if you look at the pointer of the mouse on the screen, that is where the Pangong Tso Lake is located on a map of India. If we zoom in, you can see that Pangong Tso Lake is divided between both India and China. And just adjacent to it lies Chushul Valley. On the political maps, the fingers are not clearly visible, and if we switch to satellite mode, we can easily see 8 fingers on the northern side of Pangong Tso Lake. And the line intersecting Pangong Tso drawn in red color is line of actual control, but the Chinese machinations of control over greater and greater territory of India has led to the shift in the LAC, or you can say has led to the shift in the perception of LAC as far as China is concerned. They have started to insist that LAC is westward from what India believes, so that China can claim greater territory of Ladakh. And hence, the line drawn in the yellow color is the Chinese perception of LAC, which cuts through the Pangong Tso Lake and also through Chushul Valley. Chinese want to control both the banks of Pangong Tso, and the northern bank as well as the southern bank has been site of clashes between Indian and Chinese sides. Then this important map location appears again on page number 1, gas well fire put out 110 days after the blowout. So a fire in one of the oil wells in Tinsukia district of eastern Assam has been tamed after 110 days of continuous blowout. And hence it becomes important for us to understand where Tinsukia is located in our country. As you can see, it lies in the easternmost part of Assam, south of Brahmaputra river and east of Dibrugarh.